Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most transformative, and honestly most misunderstood, legal documents in Nepal's history, the Birta Abolition Act of 2016. Now, I know what you're thinking, dense historic legalese, right? But stick with me, we are going to completely demystify this thing together. Because by the time we're done, you're going to see exactly how this single piece of legislation acted like a giant reset button, triggering a massive socioeconomic shift that totally rewired a nation's economy.
Right off the bat, the preamble of the act powerfully sets up the massive problem the state was trying to solve. Think about it. Before this law, you had a system where massive tracts of land were basically just hoarded by elites. And the kicker? They enjoyed complete or near-complete tax exemptions. So while the national economy was absolutely starved for revenue, working-class citizens were facing profound inequality. The government realized that if they wanted to modernize, they had to dismantle this deeply ingrained feudal structure. This preamble? It's their bold, line-in-the-sand declaration of intent.
So, to make this complex law a bit more accessible, we've broken this explainer down into 5 key steps. We'll start with the end of feudal land, move into defining Class A and B Birta, look at the conversion to Raikar, dive into registration and tenant rights, and finally, wrap up with the compensation scale.
All right, let's jump straight into part 1, the end of feudal land.
First, a quick time check. We are talking about the year 2016 in the Bikram Sambat calendar, which is right around 1959. Up until the year prior, the state was just bleeding potential revenue. But then, right in the 5th year of King Mahendra's reign, the parliament drafted and enacted this sweeping legislation. And what absolutely blows my mind about this is the immediacy of it. Literally, the second this went into effect, all previous Birta land ownership rights, the historic decrees, the royal grants, just terminated. Overnight. I mean, we're talking about a complete and total hard reset on land ownership across the country.
Moving on to step 2. Defining Birta, specifically Class A and Class B.
Okay, the absolute crucial point to grasp here is what this act was actually targeting. It was entirely about taking Birta, which were these historical, tax-exempt feudal land grants, and forcibly converting them into Raikar. Raikar is just standard, taxable land where the revenue, known as Malpat, flows directly into the government's pockets. The entire legal machinery we're unpacking today was built for this one specific purpose, turning Birta into Raikar.
But you can't just treat all land exactly the same, right? So the law split these targeted lands into 2 very distinct categories. Class A Birta represented the most, let's say, egregious form of the feudal setup. This was your uncultivated land, forests, or places where a landlord squeezed taxes out of their peasant tenants but paid virtually zero back to the state. Then you had Class B, which basically caught everything else that didn't fit that extreme description. And you really want to keep these categories in mind, because everything that follows in this act, from who gets to own what to how heavily it's taxed, depends entirely on whether you held Class A or Class B land.
Which brings us to part 3, conversion to Raikar. The government solution here was systematic and honestly pretty absolute. Step 1, declare the old Birta system completely dead. Step 2, the state assumes ultimate baseline ownership of all Birta lands. They were essentially legally nullifying all those old, dusty parchment documents that held up the feudal system for generations. And step 3, they mandated that all this newly converted Raikar land would be subjected to standard land revenue, known as Bhumikar, starting immediately in the 2016 to 2017 fiscal year. And this is where we see the new administrative reality really take shape. The government didn't just blindly guess at taxes. They instituted very specific mathematical tax brackets based on the actual quality of the land. For instance, looking at the rates applied specifically to Class B lands in the Kathmandu Valley. If you had Ababal, or first-grade premium land, you paid exactly 3 rupees per ropani. But if you were working with Chahara, the 4th-grade rocky or dry land, your tax dropped down to 1.12 rupees. It was methodical, it was fair, and most importantly, it was completely standardized.
Let's dive into part 4, registration and tenant rights.
120 days. That is exactly how long Class B Birta landlords were given to submit detailed land and tenant records to their local land office once this section of the act went live. The clock was ticking. The state demanded full transparency. They wanted to know the size of the land, who the tenants working it were, and exactly what taxes were being paid.
And trust me, the state was absolutely not messing around here. They backed up this massive bureaucratic shift with some severe teeth. If a landlord thought, hey, I'll just ignore this order from the land office, well, they'd get hit with a 500 rupee fine, which was a massive sum at the time. And if they tried to actively hide their holdings or submit false statements, we're talking up to a 1,000 rupee fine, up to a year in jail, or both. The government basically gave the land officers the authority of a court to enforce this. The days of fighting wealth from the state were abruptly over.
Now, what did this mean for the working class? The impact was incredible and completely tangible. Remember those classes of land we talked about earlier? For Class A tenants, the mohisu who actually worked the soil while the landlord kind of just sat back, the act legally registered the land directly in their names. Literally overnight, peasants became landowners. It's wild. And for Class B tenants, while the landlord kept the ultimate ownership, the tenant received ironclad legal protections. Their historical rights to cultivate that land could not just be revoked by the landlord on a whim anymore. This was a monumental, game-changing leap forward for working-class rights.
Finally, we arrive at Part 5, the compensation scale.
Because the state was essentially seizing massive revenue streams, they did set up a compensation system. And this sliding scale is absolutely fascinating because it shows you exactly who the state was prioritizing. They heavily protected the lower income Birta holders. Notice how for the first 500 rupees of revenue a landlord lost, the state actually paid them back 10 times that amount, a 1,000% compensation rate. But look at the bottom of the scale. As the landlord's wealth increased, the compensation rate just plummeted. For losses above 4,000 rupees, the state was only paying out 25%. They effectively cushioned the fall for the little guy, but forced the wealthiest elites to absorb the biggest financial hits.
And to absolutely guarantee the state didn't just bankrupt itself trying to pay off the country's richest feudal lords, the act instituted a hard ceiling. No single person could receive more than 12,000 rupees in total compensation. It didn't matter how much land or revenue you lost. If you lost millions, well, too bad. Your check was capped at exactly 12,000 rupees.
So, what does this all mean? When you step back and really look at how precisely, mathematically, and aggressively this act dismantled the old feudal system, you kind of have to wonder, how deeply does the blueprint of this 2016 Birta Abolition Act still influence who holds economic and agricultural power in Nepal today? Laws, they aren't just words on paper. They are literally the tectonic plates upon which modern societies are built. I hope this breakdown gave you a really clear, structured view into exactly how this historical shift was engineered. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.